At the end of the Second World War, there were scores of high-ranking Nazis who were hunted. This included the remaining members of Hitler's government, who were trying to hide out wherever they could. There were thousands of members of the SS who tried their best to conceal themselves within the German civilian populations, but some were turned over. Inside of Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, some of the SS guards, including Irma Gräser, were trying to hide out as a prisoner, but it didn't take long before the inmates did give them over to the liberators. There were roughly 140,000 cases relating to Nazi-era crimes brought between 1945 and 2005, but only over 6,500 were ever convicted and did bring some form of reprisal and justice for those people who suffered. There are today a small collection of wanted Nazi war criminals who are being hunted and searched for, and there is hope that these people, many of whom are in their 90s or even older, that they will receive their day in court to answer for their behaviour, which occurred in a conflict 80 years ago. This includes former guards of the concentration camps, SS officers involved in horrific war crimes, and others who were complicit and involved in massacre and slaughter. There are still victims of the conflict who lie under the ground too, their fates and bodies yet to have been discovered. In this video we shall look at the fates of those last Nazi war criminals who are still being hunted and searched for, and discover what they did during World War II that has led to the desire to bring them to a courtroom today. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Even in the past decade, 70 years after World War II, there have been a number of Germans and collaborators who have been brought to trial for their crimes. One of the most famous defendants, Oskar Gröning, in recent years, even conducted interviews after the conflict, in which he repeated his hatred of those who the Nazis were persecuted, and these remarks even shocked the film crews covering Auschwitz. Gröning was based at Auschwitz, and he was involved in counting and sorting the money taken from the prisoners who arrived at the camp, and in overseeing the theft and confiscation of prisoner personal property when they arrived on the trains. He knew intricately the mass killing operations of Auschwitz, and in 2014 he was charged with being an accessory to the murder of 300,000 people, and at the age of 93 he was judged fit to stand trial. Gröning was found guilty of knowingly facilitating mass murder and was sentenced to 4 years imprisonment, and despite appealing, he died on the 9th of March 2018 before his prison sentence began. There was in 2021 a 100-year-old former guard of Sachsenhausen concentration camp identified as Josef S., who was accused of being involved in the shooting of Soviet prisoners of war and in murdering others using the pesticide Zyklon B. Josef S. was charged with assisting the murder of 3,518 prisoners, and the old man arrived in court and a wheelchair and tried his best to shield his face from photographers. There was also the case of Irmgard Fürstner, a 99-year-old woman who worked as a former secretary at Stutthof concentration camp, and she was convicted of being an accessory to the murder of more than 10,000 people during World War II. It was said of her actions that Fürstner not only physically helped the camp commandant and his adjutants with whom she worked together in a spirit of trust, she supported them psychologically and was regarded as an obedient subordinate who worked inside of the deadly Stutthof site. Fürstner has been regarded as one of the final Nazi war criminals, especially one of the final female ones, and her conviction was upheld by the German Federal Court of Justice, and she received a 2-year suspended sentence. She is, as of this date in December 2024, still living, but there are a number of other wanted Nazi war criminals who are being searched for, and it is known that these are living today. We will now look at these hunted men and also women. Born in 1925, Axel Andersen was a Danish foreign volunteer of the Waffen-SS. When the Germans occupied Denmark, despite it being neutral, there were many men who volunteered to serve inside of the SS and also the German army. There were a few thousand who died during the conflict, and the Danes did have a low mortality rate inside of the German and Nazi groups, fighting against the Allies and the Soviets, but Axel Andersen during the conflict did get involved in war crimes. He served as a guard in the Judenlager, a camp for Jewish inmates and prisoners in Babrusk in Belarus. Inside of this camp, prisoners were kept in terrible conditions before they were sent on to the extermination facilities and concentration camps. There were huge massacres in this region carried out by the SS, and Andersen was involved in these, which resulted in the slaughter of 1,400 inmates and prisoners. There have been attempts to extradite Axel Andersen, who returned to Denmark at the end of the war, but these have been repeatedly denied. Recently in 2016, an appeal to the Danish authorities to prosecute Andersen was also turned down, and the Simon Wiesenthal Centre, who tries still today to bring charges against war criminals, claimed this decision, like the investigation which gave almost exclusive credence to the recent interviews of the suspects who denied any connection to the camp, totally ignored evidence which proved otherwise that the Danish guards had served in the camps and were responsible for discipline during the period from October 1942 to May 1943. This scandalous decision, as in the decision to not allow war crimes trials to go ahead, is a clear indication of the lack of will of the Danish authorities to pursue such cases. It is unfortunate that Denmark, who rescued most of its Jewish community during the Holocaust, is a symbol of altruism and heroism, has not seen fit to add another modern chapter to the tradition by more than just treatment of the cases of the Holocaust crimes by Danish SS volunteers. It's still believed today that Axel Andersen is living inside of Denmark, and he is almost today 100 years old. One of the strangest episodes in recent history relating to the Second World War saw a wanted war criminal be invited into the Canadian Parliament, where he was actually applauded. This huge political blunder and scandal humiliated Canada and the politicians. Yaroslav Hunka was for his time on the list of wanted war criminals under the Simon Wiesenthal Centre, and he served in the 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS, 1st Galician. He volunteered to join the SS at 18 years old, and he was deployed in combat against the Red Army during the conflicts on the Eastern Front. His units were known for committing war crimes and in the killing of civilians, and they were implicated in the Huta Piniarka massacre. In this, there were around 1,500 people who took refuge, who were slaughtered and killed by Hunka's men, and he was involved in this. It was said that villages were shelled by artillery, and the attackers herded the villagers into barns and set fire to the village, and it burned all day. Some SS soldiers mutilated and even slaughtered women and children, and many of them were drunk, and they sang songs as they killed. One former survivor of the massacre claimed that the SS came into the village at 4 a.m, and that they began to shoot everyone. Hunka wrote his memoirs later and settled even in the UK, and he is listed as Ukrainian nationality. He married an English woman and later moved to Canada, and he became a well-known member of the local Toronto Ukrainian community. Hunka even wrote a blog and interacted online with former veterans of the SS Galician, and he began to protest about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. He was interviewed on television, and no one seemed to pick up on his previous life as a Nazi war criminal. There were a number of these war criminals who had hidden out in Canada over the years, but the shocking incident involving Yaroslav Hunka and the House of Commons in Canada was very widely publicised. On the 22nd of September 2023, the Speaker of the Commons, Anthony Rota, recognised Hunka in the chamber and said, and I quote, "We have here in the chamber today a Ukrainian-Canadian war veteran from the Second World War who fought for Ukrainian independence against the Russians and continues to support the troops today, even at his age of 98. A round of applause broke out, and Hunka waved to the crowd, and he even received 2 standing ovations, including a round of applause from Volodymyr Zelensky and his wife who were visiting. Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, even invited Hunka to attend a rally. But no one seemingly realised the dark reality of Hunka's World War II service, and that they had willingly clapped a man who is still today listed as a wanted war criminal, and both Poland and Russia still express their intention to try and extradite him to stand trial for his crimes, despite the fact he is today 99 years old and still living in Canada. Helma Kissner was born in 1923, and she is today 100 years old as of recording, soon to be 101. She was a long-standing Nazi, as in 1934 she joined the League of German Girls, the youth group for young women and teenage girls, and they were taught in this how to become mothers for the Third Reich. Helma Kissner in 1941 joined the Nazi Party officially, and during the conflict she worked as a radio operator, and she was part of the German Labour Front, and also she served the Waffen-SS. She communicated many messages for these groups, who were responsible for terrible crimes, and from the 21st of April to the 7th of July 1944, Helma Kissner worked inside of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the extermination centre of Auschwitz, the largest concentration camp, and the deadliest site of slaughter inside the Third Reich during World War II. Kissner sent many messages from the camp, and she also received many orders, which contained deadly requests daily from the SS hierarchy. She knew intricately the deadly operations of Auschwitz and what was truly happening, and she also had access to a lot of confidential official SS documents. She was then moved over from Auschwitz to the Natzweiler Struthof camp in Alsace in French territory, and at the end of the war she was arrested and remained locked up inside of prison until July 1948. In 2015, the German prosecutor's office brought proceedings against her, and they intended to bring Helma Kissner to trial, and she was accused of aiding and abetting in the murder of at least 266,390 people while she was at Auschwitz-Birkenau. But then in September 2016, it was found that Helma Kissner was unfit to stand trial, as a court in Kiel ruled so, and with this the charges were then dropped. She is still alive today, it's believed, and is living inside a care home facility for the elderly. Gregor Formanek was born in 1924, and he was a Romanian volunteer of the Waffen-SS. His father was a German, and he then saw service inside the Guard Battalion of Sachsenhausen concentration camp. Sachsenhausen was a camp where tens of thousands of people were killed, including at least 10,000 Soviet prisoners of war. It was a rough site where many prominent prisoners, such as even Stalin's son, died. In 2023, Formanek was indicted and was accused of aiding and abetting the murder of over 3,300 prisoners between July 1943 and February 1945, and there was a belief at the time that he could have been one of the last concentration camp guards ever brought to trial. But his ability to stand trial was called into question a number of times. He had previously served 10 years at the end of the war inside of a Soviet prison, but had been sentenced initially to 25 years imprisonment. In June 2024, Gregor Formanek was deemed unfit to stand trial, but there is a debate to appeal this, and it is likely that an appeal will be lodged to try and bring Gregor Formanek to court. Herbert Wähler was born in December 1921, and he joined the Einsatzgruppe during World War II, specifically Einsatzgruppe C. These Nazi death squads would ruthlessly shoot hundreds of thousands inside of occupied lands during World War II. Wähler was someone who was present at the Babi Yar massacre, in which between 100,000 and 150,000 people were slaughtered in 2 days by Nazi death squads. The massacre was the largest single mass murder by the Nazis, and Herbert Wähler would have pulled the trigger, executing many of these civilians, then becoming his victims. Their bodies were later exhumed and the corpses were burned, with ashes being scattered over nearby farmland. In March 2022, the Public Prosecutor's Office in Kassel announced that Herbert Wähler would not face charges because of, shockingly, a lack of evidence, and he had been years earlier included in the list of the most wanted Nazi war criminals. He turned 100 in December 2021, but he is the last living member of Einsatzgruppe C today, still alive and kicking at almost the age of 103. There were many Nazis at the end of the war who were searched for heavily, and some did manage to escape Europe and flee to South America and other countries. This included Adalbert Heim, Dr. Death, who worked inside of various concentration camps, and he tortured inmates daily at Mauthausen. He fled Germany in 1962 and he died in Cairo in 1992, but the Simon Wiesenthal Centre disputed the findings of this and he remained on the Nazi fugitive list. There was also Alois Brunner, the former assistant of Adolf Eichmann, who was responsible for the deportations of over 100,000 people to the death camps, and he also fled Germany at the end of the war. His death was confirmed as occurring in 2001, and he died in Syria, living out very secretly. But there are a few war criminals who are still being researched who have not appeared on the most wanted list. Those individuals mentioned in this video today probably won't be brought to trial, as they are either approaching or past their 100th birthday, and they probably should have been brought to trial decades ago. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.